What's going on, everyone? Today I want to talk to you about how discipline is the cure to chaos. Something that I was thinking about today at the gym. Had a phenomenal shoulder session. It's about 2:30 in the morning. The shoulder session was tough, mentally challenging and heavy. But at the end of the day, we got it done. But I did have a few thoughts that I wanted to share with you during this crucial time. And from my observations, we are all kind of dealing with similar shit in our life at this point. And so I just wanted to kind of bring that up to your attention, and why discipline is really the cure to chaos. Now, when it comes to chaos, it looks different for everyone. I'll kind of share what kind of chaos I went through personally, and you can put yourself into my shoes and then see where my thought process, is kind of coming from. But, ever since I was young, I was kind of dealing with instability when it came to life. I didn't really have a father in my life. He was on and off, in my life. Even when he was present, he wasn't really present. Not for myself, anyway. He could care less that he had a son. I was seeing my mom. She was basically working 7 days a week, 12-hour days in the hospital. Just making sure that, we have something for ourselves. Meanwhile, my dad was just there, to take everything from us. A couple years later, my mom essentially met a guy in Czech Republic, organically, who was living in Canada. They were talking, everything was going really well. They've known each other for maybe 4 to 5 years. And then he proposed the idea that we could move with him to Canada. And so he made that decision, and he proposed that idea. He proposed to my mom, and of course, they were all happy and everything was going well. And so in 2015, we decided to make the move and come to Canada. Upon our arrival, and you know what? Before we really came here, and I knew that I was going, elsewhere into a completely different place, I really stopped participating in the day-to-day life very young. What does that mean? When I knew that whatever I did in Czech Republic was not really gonna amount to anything or take me anywhere, I started to really skip classes. I would avoid school. I would spend a lot of my time playing video games because I was really good in one particular game and I had the option to actually play professionally. But I shut everything down and I just really focused on absolutely irrelevant bullshit because I knew I was gonna move across. And so we did. And you know what? Me and my mom, we were both scared because we didn't know what to expect when we come here. What are we gonna do? A couple of months went by, I think 3 months, and my stepdad, quote unquote, he changed. He changed quite a bit. He changed drastically. He went from this sweet and loving guy to someone who was telling us what to do, making decisions for all of us. Anything we wanted to do, we had to ask him. He became very controlling, to a point where he was really abusing my mom. And you know what? I always had this pleasure, or I would, anytime I would get stressed, I would always essentially go to food. I loved chips, I loved junk food, all that kind of shit. And at that point, I reached my peak weight, which was 330 pounds, give or take. At the same time as I reached my peak weight, which I was morbidly obese at that point, myself and my mom, we have made the decision that we cannot really tolerate what we were going through because she was just exhausted. She was getting abused. I wouldn't really see a lot of that because I would spend most of my day in school. Meanwhile, she was at home. But I could tell something was off. And truth to be told, I was always very disconnected from what was going on because I could sense things were not really ideal. They were not going accordingly. But there was nothing I could do. So me and my mom, we made the decision to go into something called transition house, where essentially mothers, with children that were being abused could go, live, and try to get themselves back up on their feet. And that is when I really understood the severity of the situation, and where I really had to make sure or understand that any action that I make or anything that I do could potentially have devastating consequences for our future, not just mine, but also my mom's. I remember there was a time where I asked my mom, do we have any money? And, we spent a lot of our money basically coming here to Canada, so we didn't have much. And she's telling me, well, we have $20 essentially for the next 2 weeks. So we really had to navigate on how we were going to eat. And because I was young, I was not able to go and get a job, for another couple months. So that was a struggle in itself. It was a chaos. It was living in the unknown day by day, not knowing what we were going to do and how our life was going to unfold. All that I could do is to make sure that I become the best version that I can be, not for myself, but for her too. Because at that point, she was the only person that she could rely on. There was nobody else. It was just me and her, and it's been like that for the last couple of years. And essentially, so I was going through this chaos, and I joined the gym, and I really started to accept, healthy habits. I eventually also got a job so that I could help her and help myself, so that I could also pursue, things that I viewed as necessary in my life. But discipline is the cure to chaos, and it starts the moment when you are fed up with yourself and who you are deep down at your core. I was truly fed up with who I was. I think I was 16, 17. I wasn't going anywhere in life. I was eating my problems away. I was hiding from everyone, including myself. I was living in denial of what happened. And that is when I had to make the change in myself. And so I started to prioritize my physical health, because I knew everything starts from within. So the first step, was to create discipline for myself and to create certain structure in my life so that I could actually be healthy and be there for whenever my mom would need me. And so I remember I just took action right there in the moment. I wasn't waiting for the perfect day. I just took action. And I went on the internet and I looked up how to diet. I looked up, what things I need to know in order for me to lose the weight. And it's really all simple, it's the basics that everyone should really understand and follow day in, day out, which is essentially gonna be counting your calories and counting your macros. A lot of people think that, this is, boring stuff. Oh, I don't need to do that. I don't need to do this. But, truth to the matter is that you need to create structure within your life that you can follow every single solitary day. You need to create that discipline to be able to push through whatever comes your way. A lot of people view discipline, as this boring life where you're limited in terms of what you can do, which is not the case. The moment you have discipline and you can rely on your discipline is the moment you can truly breathe freely, because you're not operating on emotions. You operate on logic. You operate on structures and routines and systems that you have put into your life. And that is the beautiful thing about discipline. From 2019 up until now, 2025, every single year I've lost someone that mattered to me. Even my stepdad, when he passed away in 2020, if I'm not mistaken. The last 3 years we were able to really create actually a really good friendship, and he was proud of who I've become. And I believe deep down he even had his regrets about what he did to us. But ego was in his way, and he was never willing to accept the fact that he hurt us. But towards, before his passing, we were able to really create a nice friendship, and he was proud of who I was. We were able to go out together, and he would always say, "That's my stepson." Because he could see that I didn't fold, under these situations that I was going through. But, when you lose someone for 6 years, one person every single year, it's gonna take a toll on you. It's gonna be emotionally draining. And that is where you really have to rely on your discipline and on those systems in your life, because when you're a disciplined person and you have mental resilience, which you particularly build through gym, you don't act from emotional standpoint, you act from logic. And you know that when you have discipline, it's something that you can rely on day in and day out. You have structure in your life, and that structure brings you peace, because you don't have to second guess what needs to be done within your day. And you also understand yourself and who you are deep down at your core. And those are some really important qualities that I think anyone, and especially men, have to learn and understand, because you'll see, especially in today's day and age, a lot of guys operate from emotional standpoint, really. No matter what you tell them, no matter how you behave, they are always going to take everything personally, and they will always try to hide their emotions. When in reality, it's not about suppressing your emotions. They will be there, and you should be able to feel them. But you also can let them run your life. As I mentioned in the previous video, you have to be able to show up every single day, no matter what happens. And you have to stay composed and calm and make rational decisions. A lot of guys believe, from what I've noticed when I was kind of talking about discipline, whether it was on social media or in different communities that I was a part of, that I am way too extreme, I am way too intense. But why do you think I'm that way? It's because life is intense, because life is extreme. And if you're putting yourself out there every single day, you're not living in the comfort zone, you're gonna experience those extremes frequently. And so you have to build a wall to be able to sustain all the pain and those extremes that you encounter. Otherwise, your life is gonna turn into shambles. You're gonna crumble. And you know what? I remember I wrote this last week. The moment you crumble, it's gonna be 10 times harder to get back up. But you can always manage or control how much you crumble, and you don't have to crumble completely. Understand that we are gonna all encounter situations in our life that will be really hard to get through, whether it's losing someone, whether it's making some difficult decisions. We all go through that. But you don't have to let it ruin you. And that is where, the emotion and discipline, comes into place. Because the moment you have discipline in your life, emotions cannot run you. They are not gonna control you. Because you know how to control yourself. And you can operate logically. I wrote down, something that I wanted to say. Let me see if I can even... when emotions wanted to take over, Discipline gave me something to hold on to. See that? Because I'm not perfect, I always preface that. People think, I'm this like perfect guy, in the way that I speak and I elaborate. But truth to the matter is, I just don't let things, get too much into my head. I do think a lot. And I think deeply, I reflect as well. But I can't let emotions take over. Why? Because I have things to do and I have people to show up for. Yeah, honestly, there was a lot of topics that I really wanted to talk about, and I kind of got personal about my life story. But every single one of you that is watching this video, you have to understand that discipline is the key to freedom. Jocko Willink talks about it a lot. He has a book, literally, Discipline Equals Freedom. It may look like a book for children, but at the end of the day, what he's speaking about is the truth. Why is discipline the key to freedom? Again, you're operating from a systematic standpoint. You know that when you wake up, you have to do X, Y, and Z. A couple hours later, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And you repeat these routines every single solitary day. And you don't have to second guess yourself in terms of what you need to do. And that is what really gives you that freedom. Does that make sense? You almost operated like a robot. But over time, as you discipline that that consistency, you're gonna find peace in that. You're gonna find joy. You're gonna be grateful that you have that discipline. Because we live in we live in a world where everyone, like I said, is just getting emotional over small, trivial things. And they let it affect them deeply. You lose someone, of course you're gonna have pain, you're gonna grieve, you're gonna be in denial. But you also understand logically that it's just a temporary season in your life and you're gonna be able to get through it. And you know how to get through it, a lot more efficiently than maybe someone who doesn't have that discipline. That's why the gym, running, martial arts, they are such an important, crucial part of a man's life. Because again, I feel like I'm just going in circles at this point, but discipline is really the key to fucking freedom. Think about it. I'm a day trader. I trade the financial markets. If I was not disciplined as a trader, I would not be able to make any money. Because I would let emotions run me, right? If I take a loss, I might increase my risk. Then I take another loss and I'm gonna increase my risk once again. Is that a disciplined approach? No, that's emotional approach. And it's an approach that is not gonna get me anywhere close to my goals. But trading has actually given me the freedom that I've always wanted. The discipline that I keep, in my personal life directly translates into discipline in business. In my journey. I lost essentially 160 pounds, in a matter of 6 to 7 months. But how did I do that? I wasn't looking for shortcuts. I understood the basics. I understood that I have to stay disciplined. I have to have a diet. I have to count my calories. I have to work out. And it's not just a temporary season in my life where I lose the weight and then I go back to being obese. You know, it's essentially me adapting to a healthy lifestyle, sticking through with that for years to come. Essentially until the day I fucking die, because right now no one is gonna be able to take away the discipline away from me. It's gonna stick with me literally until I fucking die. And I know it. And I'm not gonna let anything affect that or take that away. But it is very important that I water that plant within my head every single day so that I continue to build upon that. You know, people are looking for these shortcuts, you know, you got peptides, you know, like retatrutide, and you have Ozempic, you know, and everyone just wants to lose weight quickly. But again, that is just a temporary solution, you know, it's a band-aid to a long-term problem. You know, you can take your Ozempic, you can take your retatrutide, but what are you getting out of it? What are you learning about yourself, you know? What kind of character are you building in the process? You're not building yourself, you're not learning anything about yourself. You literally take a fucking insulin syringe and you stick it in your shoulder or in your stomach or, I don't know, in your glute, and that's it. I don't want to discredit, you know, these peptides or, you know, these kind of supplements, but they are just a temporary solution to a much bigger problem, because you really have to restructure your whole life and adapt to a new, you have to make new habits within yourself, you know, you have to change your mindset to really be able to elevate to the next level. Sure, you can take whatever fucking you want, but you're not changing yourself, you're not rewiring your pathway in your brain. You're staying the same. And guess what? The moment you stop taking, you know, these supplements, what's gonna happen? You're just gonna rebound, you know, it's the yo-yo effect. You know, people, they go on different diets, you know, and keto and carnivore and this and that. You know, they might lose a little bit of weight, but guess what? They're gonna gain it back all again in a matter of couple weeks, you know, a couple months sometimes. You know, why these diets don't work? Like when you take keto, for example, right? Essentially means that you eat very minimal amount of carbohydrates, you know, you got a lot of protein, you got a lot of fat. Guess what? You know, in the first couple of weeks, you're gonna lose a couple pounds, no doubt. But what is that weight? It's not fat, it's water, because carbohydrates retain water within your body. So the first thing that goes away is water. So people, you know, in the beginning feel excited, you know, they are like, yeah, I'm losing weight, you know, I'm doing something right. But they are not understanding the crucial component that they are not losing fucking fat. It's just water going out of their body. And you know what? When you stop with keto, or you just have, you know, maybe a couple days where you went back on carbs, you know, you're gonna gain a lot of that water weight back. And then it's another fuck up with your mind, because people are like, well, I just lost like 20 pounds and then I had a couple days where I went back on carbs and I get all of that back, you know, and even more. Because they don't understand, you know, you gotta completely readjust, you know, your life, and you want to stick with something that is sustainable for you long term, and that's why you have to understand who you are deep down. You know, you can have all these diets and you can do all these things, but at the end of the day, it's about changing your life and making sure you can stick with it long term. You know, this keto, you know, carnivore, whatever else, you know, it's not sustainable long term. Your body is not gonna agree with that long term. You know, you can do it for a period of time, absolutely. If you have a photo shoot, sure, you wanna get leaner, go on fucking keto. But expect to rebound back up. You know, people will have pizza and they think, oh, I just gained like 4 pounds, you know, oh shit, I fucked up. But you didn't. I've talked about this at some point somewhere. But let's say you have a pizza, okay? You know, it's heavy in carbs, it's heavy in fat, you know, and maybe there is not a lot of protein. But the moment you combine a lot of fats and a lot of carbohydrates, your body has a lot more, it's a lot more problematic for your body to burn through that, you know, to digest it properly. And so the weight that you gained the next day is not actual fat. In order for you to gain fat, you have to eat 3,500 calories over your maintenance to get 1 pound of fat, which is half a kilo. But even then, is that all fat, and is that like damage that's, irreversible? Absolutely not. You can reverse it, even if you gain a couple of pounds the next day, well, just walk more, drink more water. Yes, that's where you can cut your carbohydrates down a little bit to give your body a break, because you're gonna have a lot of that glycogen within your body, from that pizza. But again, it's about understanding that, one setback like that is not gonna fuck you up, and you don't have to all of a sudden restrict yourself, because then you're just playing further with your mental, with your psychology. People just want quick fixes, people act from emotional standpoint. Oh, I had pizza, I fucked up, oh, so bad, now I'm getting fat. Yes, you're holding more water. Yes, you have the food in your stomach. But is it gonna set you back? No, it's not. Should you restrict yourself? No, you shouldn't. Move more, drink more water, cut on carbs, for that day, maybe in half of what you would normally eat, but continue to stay on your path. Oftentimes, even if you do cheat or if you indulge in something like junk, it can actually help you, psychologically, to stay on your path long term, right? If you've been dieting for a long time and your body is now just getting to a point where it doesn't really react, it's kind of stagnating, you got a plateau, it doesn't hurt to have a cheat meal here and there, but it has to be in moderation and it has to be in alignment with your goals, right? But you gotta understand longevity, right? A lot of people, they just, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym, for a couple months, summer is coming up, I want to get lean. Fine, but they are just gonna go back to where they were before. And honestly, like, if you just want to get lean for the summer and you're not really willing to take the long road and implement shit for years to come, you're just wasting your time anyway. Yeah, you know what, honestly, I kind of wanted to talk about different shit, but went off topic. You know what, I think value is still there, so I'm gonna roll with it. At the end of the day, like I said, discipline is key to freedom. You want to stay disciplined. Why? Because discipline gives you peace, it takes away from the anxiety of what if. You have systems in place, that you can follow day in, day out. You don't have to second guess yourself. You wake up, exactly what you need to do, what needs to be done, how you need to react to different situations. You know that emotions are not gonna fucking get you anywhere, they are just killing you. You know that you need to act from a logical standpoint. You understand yourself, and when everything else fails, you still have your discipline to fall back on. I'm not generally an aggressive person, but why do I love the gym? Because when I have anger in myself, and I really feel angry and I want to just punch shit, I know that I can go to the gym and I can do that through lifting heavy weight. I'm essentially punishing myself for the way that I feel. I know how fucked up that sounds, but ask anyone who's been in the gym for 10, 15, 20 years. Why are they still coming to the gym? First of all, because they love to train, but second, because of how it makes them feel. We all have different ways of suppressing ourselves, right? Suppressing our emotions. But really, you don't want to suppress them. You want to feel them and you want to get them out of your body a certain way, okay? Again, it can be gym, it can be running, it can be MMA, martial arts, whatever. It can be anything. But you want to feel these emotions and extract them out of your body. That's where, again, like, you are regulating yourself, your hormones, your mental state through physical activity. We all start because we want to change our body. You want to look a certain way, and there is nothing wrong with that. But over time, as you continue to stick with it, stick with your routines, stick with the gym, you're gonna understand it goes much further than just the physical aspect. You're not building your body, you're building your mindset. You're building that resilience that I always preached and I always talked about. It is so, so important. You know, if you want to really take your life to the next level and accomplish certain things, whether it's building a good business, you know, being a good partner, making money, you know, being there for your family, being there for yourself, right? Being there for yourself in the sense that you can actually rely on yourself, you know, if you say, okay, I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z, I'm actually gonna do it. Again, you know, you have to build that discipline. Yeah, honestly, I'm gonna leave it at that. I think what needed to be said was said. You know, understand that we all have some fucking chaos, but discipline is the cure to chaos. Discipline is what is gonna bring you peace, and it's gonna set you on the right path. Kind of touching, you know, quickly based on what I just said, you know, when you want to build something meaningful in life, you have to stay logical and you cannot let emotions run you or run your life. No matter what you're going through, you have to remain logical and composed. Yes, certain things will hurt you. I'm dealing with that pain right now as I'm sitting in the car. But I know I'm gonna get through it somehow, some way. Do I have closure? I don't. Am I ever gonna have closure? Who knows? But I know there are certain things I can control at this point in time. And I don't have to worry so much about everything else. Because there is only one thing that I can control, and that's myself. Not others. Not what others do, not what others say. And I think all of us, you know, should kind of act that way and have that kind of mindset. I'm gonna quickly run you through the workout that I did. I'm a big proponent of bro split. But anyway, today was shoulders. So I did, you know, I do my warm up, you know, dynamic stretches and all that good stuff. And then I go into heavy pressing, you know, progressive overload. Normally I would do dumbbell presses, but right now I just do Smith machines. So I'll do Smith machine presses, you know, a couple sets of that. I'll go into side laterals, pushing heavy weight these days. I love the way that I can just be angry, lift that up. Front raises, because I really just want to build, you know, that front shoulder. Yeah, then we did, you know, reverse pec deck, you know, supersetting that with reverse flies, you know, with dumbbells. Dumbbell shrugs. And that was pretty much the whole fucking workout. Structured exactly the way I like it. Intensity was there. I wasn't on my phone throughout the workout. I was listening to fucking music. I was in the zone, ignoring everything else that was going on around me. It was heavy, but it was great. It was mentally challenging, and I love that. You want to learn to love the fucking pain that you go through. Embrace it, you know, don't try to just suppress it. Oh, you know, it's so painful. Oh, I'm gonna fucking smoke a joint, you know, and have alcohol. Fuck that shit. You're a weak piece of shit if you think like that. Go into the gym and lift some heavy fucking weight. Build your physique. Build your mindset. At the end of the day, no one fucking gives a shit about how you feel. I've learned that early on. I had people, you know, that are very close to me. They were like, oh yeah, I feel that. Yeah, all this, yeah. You'll get through it. But whenever I needed them, they were never really fucking present. But you know what was present? The gym. My ability to extract everything out of myself, you know, my ability to push myself, my ability to stay mentally resilient. No matter what I was going through, I got through it. And you will get through it as well. But you have to stop feeling sorry for yourself. You're gonna make mistakes, you're gonna lose people in your life, and that's fine and that's normal. If you made mistakes, you know, anywhere in business, in relationship, you know, reflect on them, make sure you don't repeat them again. but shit already happened, consequences happened, you know. Can you control it? No, you can't. If people cut you off, can you control it? No, you can't. They've made that decision. Is there anything else you can do? No. Yeah, you could call them, you know, you could be like, yeah, let's solve it, you know. You could beg for help. You know what, that's fine, but oftentimes, if someone made a decision, they are done. They are not gonna take you back. You know, that business partner he's done with you as well. Your friends, you fucked up. Why would they take you back? You know, sometimes you might give a second chance or even third chance. I've done that many, many times. But you cannot be repeating the same mistakes all over again. You really have to, you know, take a fucking piece of paper, write it down, sleep on it, and understand it, and make sure you don't repeat those mistakes again, right? It's all about growth. You know, me going ghost is not because I'm emotional. I had, you know, an hour to like 2 hours. I wasn't paying attention to the time because I didn't have my phone, but I had maybe 2 hours, you know, just to think to myself, you know, sit on the ground, literally in the fucking sun. What am I gonna do? What is the most rational choice for me, for my well-being and for my growth? And that was to disappear. Even if it hurts, yeah, like, you know what? Some people were a part of my life for years now. I was used to that routine. I was used to those people, you know. Again, I mean, it's literally the 6th year that I'm losing someone. Yet I'm still here and I'm still fighting through it. And I know I will get through it, and so will you. Before I, you know, kind of disappeared from pretty much everywhere besides fucking YouTube now, I was speaking with guys and they were dealing in a, you know, similar way as I did. They were not sure why they feel so shitty. But it's because changes have to be made, right? You're gonna have to make the tough decisions. You know, you love someone, well, you're gonna sometimes have to let them go. You know, you have a business, but the business is clearly not for you. You're gonna just have to let it go. You know, if you really want to change, you may have to move to a different city. Start all over again with no one. From the beginning. Build yourself from the ground up. But don't forget this, you know, there are basics that you really have to master and understand, and the sooner you understand them, the better off you're gonna be. And again, discipline, you know, is the #1 thing for any single motherfucker out here. Being able to control your sexual urges, you know what, and this is how I'm gonna finish this whole video. You have to be able to control your sexual urges. You have to be able to not think sexually. Keep your dick in your pants. Don't fucking touch it. Stop watching porn. Stop just getting, you know, quick gratification, I guess, you know. Stop watching porn, you know. Stop being so sexually stimulated, you know. Delete all those dating apps. Get rid of all that shit, man. It's killing you. It really is. You know, a lot of people think, you know, like sperm is just this liquid, you know, that, you know, whatever, you just fucking spray on someone. No, it's not. It's a powerful life force. It's full of vitamins and minerals, and your body has the ability to absorb it back. You know what I mean? On top of that, like, if you just continuously stimulate your mind in a sexual way, you're never gonna be able to view woman for who she is. You're always gonna associate her with what she can do for you sexually. You're gonna always have the sexual mindset, like, okay, what can you do for me? I don't give a fuck about you as a person. Let's fuck, right? Cut all the vices out of your life. Whether it's smoking, whether it's porn, junk food, drugs, cut that shit out. I stopped smoking myself, you know, I was smoking for a long time. I stopped smoking because, you know, because of someone, and I'm gonna not smoke anymore. I'm done with that. I used to smoke cigarettes, a pack a day. But I'm cutting everything out and I'm changing my life around. Because I understood that it's costing me relationships and I'm losing people because of the way that I was. Even though I was still rational and I was still disciplined, there were certain habits that I was continuously watering that were not conducive with who I wanted to be or who I want to be, right? And that's why I have to really change myself, and that's why I have to speak about shit, now publicly. Whether it gets, 5 views, 0 views, 100 views, it doesn't matter, this is just my life story and this is what I want to talk about. I'm not here for validation, I'm not here for attraction, I'm here to just speak my fucking thoughts, and see where that takes me, I have a certain vision of who I want to be. And I want to refer back to these videos, in a couple months' time, couple years' time, and see where I came from, right? But I understood that some of the shit that I was doing was not getting me anywhere. It was, in fact, really limiting myself. It was limiting my relationships with people. It was limiting who I was. And I have to change myself. I have to change the way that I think, especially when you lose someone that you really care about. And you care about them as a person, not just what they can do for you. That hurts even more. And you have to sit with that fucking feeling, daily. You have to fight that. You know what? I think it's after getting shot, it's like one of the most painful things when you know that your actions cost you relationship with someone. Because you are not at your best, or perhaps you are just not acting right because of other external influences. So you have to really change yourself, bro. Change yourself. Get out of your fucking comfort zone. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Accept the mistakes that you make and do something about them. Don't repeat them. Change your mindset. Change your habits. Change your life. Listen to Ed Milet, Jocko Willink. Read that fucking book, Discipline Equals Freedom. He's got multiple other books that are great. Tony Robbins, all these old school guys. I mean, Andrew Tate has some decent advice as well, but I really just like the military aspect of shit, right? And that's where Ed Milet, comes into play. Jocko Willink, they really come into play. Dave Goggins, he can be good for motivation as well. Would I really listen to him? I don't know. To each their own, right? But change yourself, right? You want to change your life, you want to accomplish great things in life, you have to change the way you think, you have to change the way you operate, you have to change the way you fucking move. You can't be the same person and expect greatness. If your habits were good, if you were doing the shit you are supposed to be doing, or you are supposed to be doing, you would be in a completely different place right now. But guess what? No. You're still broke, you still look like shit, and you still think like a fucking loser. And yet you want to have millions of dollars in your bank account. Get real with yourself. And especially if you're in your 20s, there is no fucking balance because you're gonna live your 20s only once. And that's where you got really nothing to lose. You don't have a family in terms of wife, kids, more than likely. You can still take the risk, big risk, so to speak. You might still live with your parents, whatever. But in your 20s is where you can really afford to lose everything and rebuild. When you're in your 30s, the stakes are a lot more higher because then at that point, let's just say you are halfway through your life, right? 30s, and you got your 60s. When you're in your 60s, you're fucking old. Let's be honest. You're not gonna have the same amount of energy that you do right now. I know that right now, the schedule that I have, which is basically, I'm a night owl, I can do it. I can stick with it. But I also understand once I'm in my 30s and 40s, my body is not really gonna agree with it so much. It's gonna be a lot more challenging for me to pull, 18-hour days, 20-hour days. This year, multiple times, I've been awake for 2 days straight. Do I recommend it? Absolutely not, but it was necessary. I wanted to go to sleep, yeah. But I had to fucking push through it regardless. because I knew I had to get shit done, right? It doesn't get much simpler than that, bro. Like, if you're in your 20s, fuck balance, you know. You don't need to go out and party. You don't need to go out and smoke and drink. You know, if you got a girl, go out with her, absolutely. But in terms of like having that balance, you know, where you, I feel like, you know, I just want to go party. No, you don't fucking need that, bro. You need to build yourself, your mind. You need to build your body. And you need to build your finances. Eventually, maybe you're gonna meet a girl. You want to make sure you show up, you know, in the right way. Someone she respects, you know, someone she values. She can come to you for advice. You don't want to be just one-dimensional motherfucker. You know, all you care is about how you look and about the money you have. It's not about that. You want to have a multi-dimensional approach to life, all right? You want to be able to communicate about multiple topics. That's where, you know, having knowledge about everything comes into play. Whether it's politics, animals, cars, even makeup, man. You know what? Fucking makeup, you know a little bit about it as well. Because when you're with a girl, they like makeup, right? They like the girly shit. Learn a little bit about that, you know. It's her interest. Clothing. I don't know. Family, you know, psychology. Like, there's so many things, you know. You want to be multiversed, you know. Music. You don't just want to listen to one type of music. You want to be able to listen to everything and know a little bit about everything, bro. Even if you don't have like 100% of that knowledge, that's fine. But at least, like, if she brings something up, you can kind of communicate, you know, like, okay, yeah, you know, I heard about this, heard about that, right? You can still continue that conversation even if you know nothing about it, right? But it shows that you're not just one-dimensional, like, okay, well, I just know how to make money, or I just know how to build my body. A lot of guys, they know how to build their body, but they don't really understand or see, you know, the skills that you learn throughout the whole process. You know, they think it's just about getting that six-pack. No, it's fucking not, you know. It's everything that you have to do to reach that point. And at the same time, you also want to be able to share that with others, you know. I said it like this, and that's my finishing fucking thought. Imagine that you have a lot of movies on your hard drive, okay? Or documents that are important. You take that hard drive from the computer and you throw it into the garbage. What is it? It's waste. So imagine if you possess, you know, certain knowledge about something, whatever it could be, and you never share it with anyone. You're just wasting your potential, you're wasting that knowledge, and you are really just doing a disservice, not only to yourself, but to everybody else. Because we live in a world where everyone is just, oh, motivational shit, you know, quick dopamine hits, you know. There is a lot of people now that are speaking, you know, from their experience. They are speaking their heart out. I respect that very much. But there is still a lot of those people that are trying to perceive themselves, you know, as this perfect image. You know, I don't deal with pain. You know, I have no emotions. I'm fucking 100% perfect. Look at me. I'm so perfect. No, I'm not. I strive for perfection, but I'm not fucking perfect. I deal with shit just like everybody else, but I also know how to regulate that shit so that it doesn't affect my day-to-day life. I deal with pain, with heartbreaks. I lose money, but I deal with that no matter what happens. And I know I can rely on myself to get myself out of that shithole, right? So that I don't end up in hell. I don't end up on the ground, you know, crumbling. Because the last thing I want to do is to really crumble and never be able to get back up. So that's how I'm gonna finish it. Much love and respect to everyone. Make sure you stay on the grind, all right? I mean, if you guys got questions, you know, let me know. I know this was a long video, 15 minutes, crazy shit. You know what, I had a lot of things I wanted to talk about, kind of prepare that, but you know what, shit happens, right? You just get carried away. So yeah, much love and respect, you know. Stay on the grind, and I'll catch you next time.